Father, guide my sword. Today on the Manspace. Welcome to the Manspace podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter. Welcome, spacemen, to Mike's episode. Just kidding. I just wanted to make Mike feel pressure.
It just worked. I was talking to the patron saint before this.
Which, by the way, he totally hooked Matt up.
I was going to say, I failed to thank you, but I am drinking your dew today. That was awesome. Thank you.
I know.
Your due today.
Remember, we're always open to more patron saints or angel investors. Who knows what nickname we could give you if stuff just shows up on our doorstep. Anyway, continue, Mike. You were talking to patron saint.
And I asked him, I said, hey, what's a topic? And he goes, anyway, we, back and forth. And I said, oh, no, I think I have a topic. And I said, which Rob will try to make me be in charge of. And I said, I don't want to be in charge of it. I just want to give the topic. And he goes, and then sit and only talk for 3 minutes.
Isn't it funny that it's like, Rob's going to make me be in charge of the idea that I have. I'm not going to make you, Mike.
It's fine. I mean, thank you.
Because my instincts are telling me not to. And I trust my instincts.
It brings up another possible topic.
But that's there you go. Now you're in total control, dude. You just
see.
You're going to surprise us now.
I know. Maybe we'll just do a whole different
topic. It's more just something I've been curious about lately. But it's more like I don't know that it's.
Throw it out as a riff track, dude.
What?
Throw it out as a riff track.
Yeah, maybe we'll just go with that.
Probably not, but okay. So I've been sitting in increasing numbers of meetings lately, and I always used to say that if there was someone who wanted to be the guy in charge, I was more than happy to let him.
Yeah.
Right. I've said that on this show.
You just said it.
I did just say it. But sitting in this meeting the other day, I was like, oh, is it that, or is it I just don't want my ideas to get crapped on or be dismissed, and so I just don't say anything? And I attribute it to the fact that they really like, how do I know that that person who's filling the space isn't filling the space because they feel like, so is no one going to take charge here?
That's actually interesting. I actually, in short, we had board conference, and with the stake presidency, remember we had to go visit somebody's house, and I just kind of took charge because it was like, I'm okay doing it, and other people feel awkward, so I'll just do it. It's never because it's like your idea is dumb. It's always like, well, I'll just fill the space.
Yeah.
Until somebody else comes up with something. And that's what happened on this show. And then it was like, Rob, fill the space. It's like, okay, which I'm more than happy to do because I love my own voice.
No, it is sad how much of what we do is just driven by discomfort.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Whatever makes you uncomfortable is like what motivates you probably 80% of the time, and then you're intentional the other 20.
I really wish I had, knowing people who are like entrepreneurs who are like, yeah, I'll just try it out. Like if it fails, then cool. I feel like, I want that so bad. Like that episode
I think even there though, don't you think? Like,
what do you mean?
Like doing nothing, and like when you talk to people that have that kind of mindset,
yeah,
they're not that they should be doing something different, I guess, but like a lot of why they do that is because sitting at like a predictable desk job working for somebody else is like death. That would be totally uncomfortable. I mean, I think there's obviously like a space probably between discomfort and striving for something better that we exist in too. But like, yeah, I just wonder if there would be a way to quantify, because I think if you know what makes somebody uncomfortable, like, this is going to sound like world domination here, but like you could control a lot just by knowing what makes everybody uncomfortable. And I think that's partly why we love like stand-up comedy so much because it's like I'm right on the edge of being made uncomfortable all the time, but we're gonna laugh about it.
It is interesting. Like that one's funny because it's like the stand up comedy. It's like, oh, it lets me get close to it without actually having to like absorb it or be a part of
Yeah.
it. Or I just like, oh, and if it's bad, it's like, I know. Can you believe this guy? Huh. Interesting. So,
Well,
in the
Mike,
interest of,
that's your breath. That's the moment between discomfort and intention for you. Is the
Yeah.
it's so funny, Mike, because I don't think anybody would ever guess how often. Because sometimes when you describe things, it sounds like you would feel uncomfortable like that often, but I don't think anybody would ever guess that. Often is the
Oh,
wrong word to use, but
no, it's more often than for sure than people suspect. Like the
Yeah.
yeah.
the most common thing I hear from like people in my ward is like, "You look so comfortable up there," and all I can think every time is, "I'm super not."
Mhm.
Like I'm, like I'm sitting closer to the guy next to me than I want to be. I'm like I'm aware of the fact that I'm being looked at. I'm aware of the fact that I have to sit and like look like I'm engaged and whatever. And half the time I'm just like, not today. Okay. Um, and anytime I have to speak, I'm um, and that's been a shift in the last couple of years that I haven't figured out yet. Cause it used to be like, give me a microphone in 10 minutes. I'm fine. And it still is that way if I can walk into a classroom and do it. If I can walk into a classroom, then I'm fine. But I don't feel like I can be quite as loose at the stand.
Yes, the
And
expectation of what you should
yeah.
look like. Yeah.
And so it's all very uncomfortable for me. And I more often than not feel some level of anxiety going into my Sundays
Hey,
and just want to get to the end of Sunday so I can be like, sweet, I'm out.
are you conducting this month?
No.
Oh, it's too
Why?
bad. Well, mom and dad would be there, wouldn't you?
That's
It's like,
true.
oh,
But mom and dad will be there on ward conference.
oh,
So
yeah,
I won't be
wouldn't happen
conducting
anyway.
anyway because they
No.
ask our bishop to conduct.
Yeah, they always do.
Yeah. So won't be me. I'll
Well,
just sit there and look pretty.
or worry about do you look pretty enough? So, but that's not our topic. I mean,
No.
shut up, Mike. That was a dumb idea. Let's move on. I have ideas.
Let's move on to Mike's other half cooked idea.
I thought I was listening while I went to the bathroom. And I thought it was a very good idea.
It's funny because you didn't say anything when you got up, and I thought, did he just cool? I guess. And it took me until like halfway through to even remember that you had your
Yeah.
earbuds in. And I was like, no, it's cool that you're walking away while I'm sharing my idea. I didn't. Cool. I guess I'm just talking to Matt now.
Mike's talking. I better leave. This sounds like it's going to be dumb. I was listening the whole time, but I just figured I needed to go pee before we started our episode. But
Anyway, yeah.
the topic is, if I understood it correctly, should we not follow our instincts? How do we know what's instinct versus feeling?
Yeah.
Because one book says do follow instincts. Another book says don't.
Yeah. So
Which one says
lessons for living, the one we just
by
finished and
Herr
reviewed last
Stutz?
week. Yeah, by Herr Stutz. That one I felt like he was really kind of leaning into that idea of like trust your instincts.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you feel like you should do it, go do it. And the coddling of the American mind, I felt like kind of gave the opposite, where it was like, no, because you're going to have anxiety that's dictating too much, and you're going to have this that's dictating too much. Like, don't assume that your emotions are going to tell you the correct thing to do. And I realized, like, I feel like that's a pretty fine line to me. So how do you distinct, like, when should I be trusting? Like, because at times, sure, my anxiety is going to keep me from doing something that might cause me harm. And other times it's just my anxiety and I have to learn to push through it. So how do I distinguish between those two moments?
That's
How do I know?
interesting.
Because
I've
most of the
never.
time it's not like I can sit there and really analyze it.
Well, it's kind of funny. I don't think I've ever really paused to think what's the difference between instinct and emotion.
Right, because
And
they kind of drive each other.
well, according to Chat GPT or just AI, Google's AI, I guess, Gemini. We are Gemini.
What is that from?
This awesome band that I saw in like, I can't even remember the name of the. It was like this little diner with like a stage in Seattle in high school, and just imagine like the most washed up butt rock band you've ever seen in your life getting up there. And I don't even know if the dude had a real accent or if he was just faking it for effect. But yeah, it's like, we're Gemini.
Gemini.
But they didn't have their drummer like got sick or something right before the show, so they just asked some dude from the audience to come play. And I think he didn't know any of Gemini's songs, so it was horrible. And the guy kept apologizing after every song and talking about how much better they are when they have their drummer. But I'm like, dude, give the guy some credit. You just threw him up there, and now you're like, this guy's holding us back.
This is not what Gemini has to offer. Anyway, when I looked it up, because I've never really thought to parse those out in my head, and maybe there's a difference here. I mean, maybe they were using these. Maybe it's semantics. Maybe Stutz was trying to say, or is it Stutz? Stutz? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Maybe he was trying to say. Maybe he was saying follow your gut, which maybe sometimes is another word for your instincts to people. But this says instincts is an automatic behavior pattern driven by survival or reproduction needs. But emotions are complex subjective feelings that we have triggered by situations. So in that context, I'd say, yeah, I mean, I don't know how often instincts kick in. If it's like a last, I mean, obviously if some sort of, it's like a fight or flight response in some ways where it's like, there's a bear, my instincts are going to kick in. Until I've trained something different, I'm probably going to, I guess I'd probably take off and run. Until aren't you supposed to make yourself look big and make noise? But anyway,
I thought you were supposed to play dead.
I think it depends on the kind of bear. Actually, someone told me it's like with a black bear you do this, with a brown bear you do this, and I was like,
good news.
I can't
According
think
to Jim
through that.
Gaffigan, how do we know the playing dead thing works? How do we know that the guy who died, that's not what he was trying to do?
You could see it anyway, because I actually think for a long time I felt like I do talk often with clients that your emotions will drive your behavior if you're not careful. Because I don't think they should drive our behavior. I think they should be a part of our behavior. Like, I think it's okay to acknowledge and understand, but I think when we let emotions drive our behavior, we end up where Matt's talking about, where it's like fear suddenly becomes, how much do we not do, or we do because of fear. And I watched a couple earlier where her anxiety went up. And so sure enough, all her responses were like driven by anxiety, and she was no longer listening at all. You could argue that was an instinct because it's for this, in her mind, it's for the survival of the relationship. I think it was more a matter of like, she does not know how to pay attention to and regulate an emotional response. So I think it matters to delineate those two things, that like, I think I should pay attention. Maybe, I don't know. Because see, now I just got further in my head being like, well, what does it mean? Like, pay attention to my instincts. How often do I listen to my instincts? How often do my instincts actually even kick in? And what's interesting is being a therapist, I can see when my instincts kick in, that because I've done this long enough, I'm trying to get better again, actually, at just listening to my instincts and just following and not thinking through where's this go next, because I've done this a ton. It's not really based on like, this is uncomfortable for me, so my instincts say to do this. My instinct says do this. And I know myself well enough therapeutically to say, okay, I'll do that. Which is different than if I feel uncomfortable and then I want to do something else. It's like,
Well, and even then, I think
Mike,
it goes.
I need to go get a tissue. This is not because I don't want to hear what you have to say.
No, sure is. This
Neil's
is the
still hear
second
it
time
anyway.
today that you've walked away while I'm about to share a thought, Rob. No, there's that. Like, I think something you read, I think, Rob, in that definition of an instinct was implied kind of the muscle memory aspect of it.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Well, then doesn't that mean at some point it's like, if it's something then that is developed, if you develop the
Automatic behavior.
instinct,
Right.
right, then at some point you're relying on the fact that you're uncomfortable, and that discomfort is causing your brain to say, okay, here's the thing I'm going to do. And so you do it. But I think, right. But then doesn't that contradict what they were saying in The Coddling of the American Mind, which is don't trust your emotional self? But isn't that where ultimately the instinct behavior is going to come from, is from feeling this thing and saying, okay, what do I mean, I guess I should do this. Great, then do it. But then do you see what I'm like? This is where I don't know. And maybe it is all just semantics.
I guess I wonder, like, this don't trust your emotional self. When I read it I think the context of these two books matter to me. Like, Stutz talks a lot about this idea of like connection to like a higher universe. And so in that context, he's saying, assuming you're lining up with that higher universe, then you will be getting instinctive promptings or nudgings or thoughts or whatever that you should listen to. It's a little bit like that book, The Secret. It's like, put the good vibes out to the universe and it will send them back to you. Put out to the universe that you want to be rich and it will make you rich. You know,
That's
like,
no secret.
I mean, I got totally distracted by that. Versus The Coddling of the American Mind, they talk so much about how people start reacting to, and I guess this is, if we just kept it in the instinct category, like what you're saying, Mike, then yeah, I learned that when something feels scary to me, that you should react by closing down or by protesting or by whatever, instead of saying, and so in that context, I feel like, no, I would be against following your instincts. At least knee-jerk reaction. I think for most people, following instincts or letting your emotional world, I think it has to be a part of the process to pause and say, okay, what is that? Well, it freaks me out. Okay, but I should still do this. I think that's the coddling of the American mind was really from the standpoint of like too many people, kind of like what Matt was saying, is it's like too many people being driven by fear and anxiety. And so they're just not doing things. Because this person thinks differently than I do, I need to go be in a safe room.
Right. And that's the thing, like the context of them to me, like The Coddling of the American Mind really was more approaching the educational aspect of society.
Yeah.
But like none of us are in academics anymore. And so I think, right, I was looking at it when I read it for like, okay, but how does this apply to me?
Right.
And so all the stuff he was taking, I was like, okay, well, how do I? And that was when we hit the section in lessons for living, it started to feel like it was contradicting this. That's where, like, for me, I was like, oh, that seems to, I couldn't quite find a way to reconcile the two things. Like, I felt like there were certainly times I needed to like the emotion should be part of the process for me, and it should help inform and make my decisions, and times it shouldn't. And I thought, sure, I spend a lot of time in self-reflection. I always have, even before I started doing this. I spend considerably more now. And so now I can pretty quickly dissect different emotions that I'm feeling and get to the why of them. But that wasn't always the case.
Here's something that let me ask this question to you guys, and then I'll tell you where my brain went with this. Where I think actually sometimes I would tell people ignore your instincts, and sometimes I'm going to tell them to follow them. Would there be a time when you would tell somebody, just to keep it simple, that ruling out instinct versus emotion, just keeping it an instinct, when you would say to somebody, follow that instinct versus don't?
Where we would say follow it instead of don't?
Yeah, like what? Give me a scenario where you'd say, this is where I'd say don't follow your instinct, and this is where I would say do follow your instinct.
I don't think I can think of one where I would say don't follow your instinct. I was hoping you were going to ask that question, because then I was going to say no. So that was instinctual.
The best part of that joke is that you said, if you would have done that, I would have said this. It worked so much better.
I was waiting for it, but you asked the other question, so I was like, yes. No, I maybe it's the way that I think of instinct. I think gut, and
yeah,
like I don't think I would ever tell anybody don't go with your gut, and so a situation where I would tell them to go with it is like I like to think of it like brain, heart, gut, and we've talked about that connection before, but I think that particularly like in a couples therapy situation where somebody's maybe getting down deeper into something that's meaningful or painful for them. Mm-hmm. When you get down to that level of the conversation, then I think I've said multiple times, just don't think what your gut tell you to do right now. And it's always the right thing. They always move closer. They always hug. They always like try and support. And people where it's like, okay, you've got all this anxiety and all this like emotional turmoil going on, and your brain's going a million different directions because you're thinking of, is my partner cheating on me or not? Well, I looked at this and this seems like they are, but then I talked to them and they said they weren't. Like, what's your gut say? Yeah, they're cheating on me. Yeah, go with that. Right. I think I view it more like to use the like inner child, inner like teenager, and wise adult. I would put like inner child as the heart, inner teenager as the brain, and wise adult is like gut. And I think that part of us is usually right. Like when we feel something deeply and it just, you're not really thinking about why it does. You're not really like feeling anything in your gut other than that instinct, but maybe you're torn emotionally, right? But I think a lot of people are always trying to mediate between like heart and mind.
Yeah.
But like that's the role the gut plays in my mind, is like the gut's the mediator.
Okay. I have some issues with those things. I'll come back to that.
Well, so I actually, I don't have issues with it. Like,
well, you're both wrong. No.
Wrong instinct, Rob. Don't go with it.
The patron saint and I were just talking about this.
El patron.
About how, like he used the phrase paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, or analysis paralysis.
And I thought, there are those times where we are so trying to analyze what we're seeing, which that's what the brain to me is more likely to do. It's more likely to sit and try to analyze. And I think, in those moments, I very much would be like, no, stop. Right. Like just go with your gut. What is it telling you? So like in that aspect, I think, and certainly like when I'm working with people and they're in an unknown area, like I don't know what to do here. I've never been in this situation before, I'm very likely to say, what's your instinct say, or what's your gut say? What do you think you should do right now? And they tell me, and I say, great, then do that.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. And it typically the thing that they're saying to do is the thing that I thought, well, this is what I think you should do, but I want to see what and sometimes it's not, but I think, well, it's what you came up with, so go for it. Like, it's not like let's find out what happens. I find I will have that conversation a lot with, like, when I'm working with parents about their kids. Well, I just don't know what to do. What do you think you should do? Okay, then do that. See what happens. Run the experiment is what I'll often tell them. Interestingly, like I can actually think of lots of times when I tell people don't trust your instinct. Usually it comes like if I've been working with someone who's highly anxious, and it's almost always like they were all like individual examples. It wasn't working with couples. It was always when I was working with an individual, but particularly if there's someone who's highly anxious, their instinct is going to be driven more often than not by anxiety. So I'll sit and tell them, stop paying it, like whatever. In fact, sometimes I've told them, if that's what you think you should do the opposite.
See, and that's maybe where the semantic thing,
right?
Like I don't associate anxiety with instinct. I associate it with impulse.
Me too. But the person I'm talking to doesn't necessarily.
No, yeah.
I think that's pretty key.
Me too. Which is that, like, that's where the other area where I thought like was in. I've been working with, like, I mean, we all deal with reframing all the time, but I think I've been working with someone in particular where I like large chunks of the session are me saying, well, what if it's not that? What else could it be? And then suggesting some of my own ideas of what it could be. And this is reframing and going back, and inevitably, like, the client's initial instinct for what the behavior is, like why they're doing it, I think, no, that's not it. And then like I'll just kind of toss out a few of like, it could be this, it could be that, and inevitably in my toss out I'm like, it's probably that one. Like, that's a much more plausible, kind of realistic, knowing what I know about people kind of thing. And so with her, like, I've been actively saying, like, no, whatever your first one is, just assume it's wrong and go find 3 more. And with reframing, I think that's often our initial interpretation is not usually going to be correct. It's going to be emotion driven. And it's usually going to not be very generous in its interpretation of why they're doing what they're doing. And so I'll always push them to go back and find something else. But again, like, you're into what is true instinct versus what is
like impulse,
right?
Protective impulse, like that. I think that's the distinction I make. Like, instinct, I feel like, is usually like I feel like in general, we get disconnected pretty regularly from our gut. And a lot of the things that I think that's, like, in my mind, that's the deepest level of self-trust. And when you can trust yourself and lead yourself, you feel a lot less anxious. You feel a lot less fear about failure and all sorts of things, right? And I think that's kind of the deepest, most important relationship, at least with, like, human beings we can have, right, is the one with our own gut. And so, yeah, a lot of the maybe first protective impulse interpretations of things, like you're saying, yeah, well, hold on, introduce like 3 more here and see if maybe there's another one that could be possible. And why is that the one that you picked up the most? And that's probably like some sort of impulsive, like, danger, maybe coming from a place of instinct, like keep yourself safe, but then anxiety, like, takes over really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what hijacks us from our gut more than anything, is anxiety swooping in.
That's partly why I think the difference in the two books of what they're talking about, Coddling the American Mind, was like, stop giving so much into this anxiety thing. Because to me, there are definitely times when I tell people, do not listen to your gut there, because, and this is where it matters what you said, Mike. It's like, you don't know what your gut is.
Yeah.
You think anxiety is your gut. So I have actually told that I have, sometimes I want to roll my eyes at this when women are like, well, I just know he's cheating, women's intuition. And I'm like,
Mhm.
don't do that, because you'll just call your anxiety women's intuition. Like, you're worried he is. And so now it's women's intuition.
Mm-hmm.
When to me, everything points to, no, I don't think that's true. I think a key difference for me, and this is kind of like what you guys are getting at, this is just the way it phrased in my head, was that I think gut, when we really learn to listen to it, especially when it comes to something relational, will almost always drive us towards each other. Like, it will tell us it's a productive thing towards what we need. And so it will almost always drive us towards connecting with somebody. My gut says to move in closer, to reach out, to do something, because the other ones is I understand there is this instinctive, sometimes, need for safety, but even that safety, the gut actually, because, um, I think most often our gut, and that's actually why, Matt, I like your analogy. At first, I was like, really, I think most people would put the adult as the brain and the gut as the impulsive teenager. But as you phrase it like this, it's like, oh yeah, the brain is the thing we give too much noise to, because it's the obnoxious teenager who's always demanding attention. The wise gut is the thing that's like, you can come and talk to me if you need to. I'm not going to force myself upon you. Like,
Mhm.
it'll be there if you learn to pay attention to me. And I got a lot of stuff that's really valuable. But I think the anxiety, it's hard for people. It tips so fast into, it's hard to delineate and slow down and say, okay, well, once you're in a calm state, then what is your gut telling you to do? Oh, well, it tells me this. Okay, then it's because when you're freaked out, then the anxiety kicks in. And I think that's the difference between those 2 points with the books, is that like, too much, I think we interpret our anxiety as like, this is telling me something. It's like, mm, even when, because I do believe fear can tell you something. But I don't think it's in the same category as anxiety of like, well, what if this? And that's when your brain spins into all these,
Yeah.
like, if you're really trusting your gut and there's a bear there, you act.
Yeah.
You don't pause and think, okay, well, what happens if this or this? It's like,
Yeah.
the fear's telling you, we'll do something. So you do it.
Hmm.
But I had a moment earlier where this woman was basically saying, I don't remember if she said my gut. She might have actually said, my gut tells me he will do this, this, and this. Like, he will respond by saying these things.
Hmm.
And I said, I'm going to need you to not trust that. I need you to trust what I just saw. He just reached out to you, grabbed your hand, it looked you in the eye, and said, I'm telling you this. I need you to pull that up and listen to that, because, and that, I think that's the semantic thing. I
But yeah,
thought
your
your
gut
anxiety is
there
telling
is like
you,
your
yeah,
brain is telling you that. Yeah.
yeah, your gut
Yeah.
would say what you said earlier, which is, hey, I want to be close to you. You said that earlier. That's your gut is
Hmm.
saying, I want to draw closer to this guy. The brain kicked in and said, well, what happens if I do? And that's the part where then it turns into something, and that's so powerful. And that's why I like that analogy of a teenage brain, is because it's like, it demands all the attention, and it totally overtakes the gut, which is not going to force itself upon you. Which I think Stutz actually also talks about, that like, old people are not going to like,
Yeah.
hey, you have to hear what I have to say. It's like, hey, I've got something to say if you want to hear it. If you don't, cool. Like, I think the gut's the same way. It's like, hey, if you learn to listen to me, and keep in mind and I don't think this is always the case, but I really think the gut drives us towards the idea of creating something better and bigger, rather than running from something that's scary. I don't think the gut usually tells us run from scary. It says, hey, you can, this may be hard, but do this thing. Like, Matt, when you're saying, telling clients, like, what's your gut telling you to do? We'll lean closer. Okay. Don't overthink that. Because if you start to think about it, you'll think, well, what
Hmm.
if she rejects me when I do that?
Well, that
Just
is,
lean in.
yeah, interesting full circle moment too, Mike.
Hi.
Maybe you are the gut in those meetings and you're like, oh, wait.
Oh yeah.
But the no, when you
And
I
Rob's the
think when you think
obnoxious
about
teenager.
when you think about the biology of it though, too, I think there's probably more ways of knowing or connecting to ourselves than we think. Because yeah, when you say creation, like your gut is literally part of the system that like grows your physical body, right?
Yeah.
Like everything you need to sustain a physical body is absorbed at that level. And arguably now maybe there's more neurons in your gut than in your brain. There's all sorts of things that are tied to it. But yeah, I think if you think about um like the way those systems interact, like side note, I need to get your guys' feedback on some like metaphors that I've been working with for like 6 months that I cannot tie together, but this is kind of part of it. But um yeah, like your gut, if you think of it as kind of knowing intuitively
Yeah.
what you need and don't need,
Yeah.
right? Like it absorbs what you need and lets go of what you don't need. And
Yeah.
your heart is constantly in concert with your lungs, like literally infusing you with life and vitality. That's kind of like emotional experiencing, right? And your brain is constantly like regulating, processing, and interpreting. And like that's kind of what we're talking about, right? And so when they're all working together, which ultimately is the goal, even with like that inner child, inner teenager and
Mm-hmm.
wise adult, and like they're meant to kind of work in concert with each other. But like the wise adult is the one that knows how to kind of bring everybody into harmony with each other. But yeah, I think we can learn a lot from like just tying in like the biological life-giving processes of organs and like how they interface with some of this stuff. And yeah, I mean, you're like that's kind of instinctive. You watch animals, we do it too, body language wise, right? If I feel threatened at a deep level, I'm going to cover my abdomen, right? I'm going to like preserve my gut. I'm not like save the brain, right? Like we go to gut. And
Right.
animals, when they feel comfortable, right, are kind of like exposing their gut. And I think it's just a really intuitive part of our system that, yeah, like you're saying, it's not gonna scream and dominate, but it's there in a really powerful way if you can tune into it and listen to it.
I actually think it's an interesting addition to the episode that probably the listener was a little bit disappointed in when we talked about the connection between exercise, food, and mental health, and thinking
Oh,
part of learning to listen to your gut isn't just, and this I find this, I think it's fascinating that research continues to come out about gut health and how it ties into mental health, but it's still so like young that it's like we don't know anything. We just know the gut is a really big factor in this picture, but we can't even say fully what that means. But to think that if you're really going to listen to your gut, you have to pay attention to like my sister will sometimes talk about, if she's been eating really unhealthy for a while, that sometimes it feels like her body's like, can you just please give me some vegetables? Like that, like our guts, like, hey, could you stop shoving crap into me and then hoping I'm going to function well for you? Like, but we think, I think because, and I don't know, I think it ties into the fact that we view logic as like the ultimate in emotional maturity. And when you're really, a full grown adult, you'll use your brain. And so the brain became everything, and the brain's at the top, just like North America. And so we're the best. And so the top is the best and the bottom is crap. And so
but both you guys
literally,
lost Canada.
Oh, man.
I retained it.
oh, well, not much like our current situation. I don't think Canada wants us anymore. Anyway, I I think paying attention to like it's a little bit holistic or hippie to say, yeah, I mean, if I want to start listening to my gut, I do have to pay attention to, I really think knowing what your gut would be telling you and what it would not be telling you, that it would be telling you something that would drive you closer to other people, generally speaking. I feel like almost always. But because I think that's an instinctive part of like humans, it's innate. We need a clan, we need a group, we need a family, we need whatever. But I think so. Learning to listen to it and to say, okay, when I'm in a calm state, what is it telling me to do? But I also think knowing that, well, it's not telling me much right now because it's taking a nap because I just fitted a bunch of Cheetos. Now I'm not the best at that, but I think I can't expect to listen to my gut very well if I've been neglecting it totally, that it will just like spring to life whenever I need it. It's a little bit like when people are like, yeah, I tried meditating when I was really anxious, but it didn't work. I was like, well, how often do you meditate in general? Like, never. Well, that's why it didn't work. Like, it's not a muscle you have. You got to build that muscle.
Yeah.
So I think the gut's the same way. It's like, well, how do you build that muscle? And it's actually, I think the more we learn to ignore it, which plenty of us do because anxiety kicks in, because I can tell you there are tons of times when my gut says, do this in this session right now. And then my brain thinks, no, that's going to be weird. So I'm not going to do that. So I don't do it. Even though it's not like people look at me and think, Rob, you are the pinnacle of professionalism in the office. You'll never do anything weird. So I don't know why, but it kicks in, and then I learn to just ignore my gut. And then I think it becomes harder to hear my gut.
Well, and it's like I've been thinking, right? Like, how do you teach yourself to do this? Because I think at this point, a lot of us probably do ignore our gut.
Yeah.
Or we misinterpret it, or we whatever.
Yeah, we follow
And
impulse and call it gut.
Yeah. And that, the thing you said, right? How what you've noticed that instinctively, it seems, the thing that people think they should do tends to bring them closer to another person, tends to kind of build the relationship. And I, in my head, as you were talking, it kind of broadened, and it's a question that I've tried to start asking myself more as I decision make. But it does kind of require knowing, like for me, like what are the things, what are the guiding principles I want in my life? And then the question is, okay, does this thing that I feel like I should do right now move me closer to that or further from it?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's moving me further from it, it's probably not something I should be doing. And so to me, I think, no, our instinct will know, like, no, this puts you where you want to go. So go. Like, yeah, it's going to be scary. Go do it anyway, because it's going to put you closer to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Or to the man that you want to be. And
as Carl's junk said.
Carl's junk.
I can't help it.
No, really, that is like almost a direct quote, right? It's like, where your fear is, there is your task.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I guess that for me, because you guys have sessions right now, that is like my takeaway is, like, I mean, it's that quote that you just said, like, no, like, you got to look at where you want to go. And if it moves you closer, do it. Even if it's fear, even if it's whatever. In fact, if it's fear, it's probably more likely where you should go, but because it's going to stretch you. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one, because when we read your pick for the next book, Rob, I think it'll get into a lot of like the mythology and symbols of all of that.
Yeah, we'll I mean, technically it's our pick. I wanted to do the book and you did too, so it works. Although I did notice, by the way, in the beginning of the last episode, because of the way the sound was with the thing, that it almost kind of cuts off at the ends, and some gonads. If you listen again, it's like, and some gonads. I was like, no, that's the best part. He said gonads. All right, well then, spacemen, train your gut. Eat better.
Metamucil.
That's right. Slow yourself down and listen. And then come back and catch us next time on the Manspace. Hippy dippy baloney.